They said this guy named John Diggs, LPC, was going to talk to you about kindness today, and that is my intention. Before I get started, I want to be clear about a few things. When we are doing a social media takeover and we're speaking to you, we're not in the form of a clinician. Like, this doesn't take the place of therapy. Does that make sense? Because we're not sitting down with you. We're not listening to your story, right? You haven't provided us with consent for treatment. And so when we're providing these talks, I'm asking you to see it as tips, things that you could take and implement in your life, but it does not take the place of therapy. All right? Let's get a head nod. I can't see you, but it'll be helpful if you just head nod to let yourself know you're accepting this moment, not as therapy, but maybe as advice or some steps that you can take. Now, when I'm in this form, I'm very clear about what my intention is. When I'm in this form, I'm here to help you interrupt the pattern. I don't know specifically the thing that you are experiencing, but the way I want to use my words is that it'll catch fire. I want it to catch fire in such a way that it keeps you on the edge, keep you burning, keep you moving and pressing towards the thing that you want to move towards in your life. I want you to have such excitement that when you get off the call, you're like, oh, that John said something to me today, and it propels you or compels you to do something differently. I'm here to help you interrupt the pattern when I'm in this form. I'm here to help you change your relationship to shame and guilt. Now, before I continue with shame and guilt, I want y'all to understand that big money is made from shaming and guilting people. Yeah, he said it. Big money goes into keeping you in a space of shame and in a space of guilt. And so I want to put out on the airways now to the people that participate in driving their revenue by keeping people suffering in secret and in silence. I don't have no beef with you. This is not a threat on your game. This is not a threat on how you choose to live your life and how you choose to do those things. I am simply offering another way through kindness to examine your truths and hope that if you see the truth, that you can begin to set an intention and then tell a different story. The message that I have for you, some people have called it a dangerous message. To live a life free of shame and guilt and solely live or buy into this way of being of light love. Something that you all can do for me as I am sharing this message, because sometimes I hold back a little bit, or I get nervous because I know the power of practicing kindness towards yourself. I ask that you send me your positive prayers, positive thoughts of protection, so that as I continue to elevate the platform of kindness, I am not harmed in the process. All right? Very good. All right, let's jump into some things. Let's get it on. I was thinking about how I wanted to start my talk today about kindness. And I figured the best way to do it is to be honest with you and bring a little bit of me into the space. The truth of the matter is, maybe about 4, maybe 5 years ago, I had to deal with the possibility that I wasn't a nice person. I don't know if it's any of you all out there like that. You had to deal with the possibility that you were not a nice person. I'm not. I'm not. And oftentimes what I've come to realize is that nice is about understanding or creating an action based upon a right or wrong. And the right or wrong is determined by that society, or it is determined by that group. A lot of time being nice is about right or wrong. You know the phrase, do the right thing, right? It's about a right or wrong, or a good or bad. And I have found out that I had lived so much of my life trying to be nice that I had betrayed myself. You say you did what, John? Yeah, because I was so invested. And would it be seen as good or bad or right or wrong that oftentimes I left my voice outside of the equation. And anytime you come to the table and you're having a negotiation or coming up with some choice, you're about to make a choice or some plan, and you are not represented in that choice, then you have betrayed yourself, because you are now doing essentially what you've blamed others for doing, not listening to you, not valuing you, not creating a space for you to belong. And so sometimes, I don't have beef with people who are nice. I really don't. What I understand is oftentimes being nice is at the sacrifice of how you feel or about your personal views about something. So I've decided to invest in kindness. Kindness creates a space for understanding. Kindness is neutral. It doesn't have any opponents. It doesn't have any enemies because it doesn't choose sides. If you look at the definition, kindness, and there are several definitions of it, it's about being generous. It's about being friendly, right? But what if we decided to be kind to yourself? Then what would it look like if I'm generous to me? What would it look like if I'm friendly towards myself? Then perhaps it would sound something like creating a space for me to tell my story and creating the space to hear the story of others. So I typically tend to navigate through life from a space of getting an understanding first, and then that's how I make my decisions. I want to bring me to the table and also hear from the other person. And the short of it is learning how to be an empathetic person. Not because it's a right or wrong or good or bad, but it's because I see you. And as a result of seeing you, it resonates because I can see me. And in that way, I'm not here to cause you any harm or any wrongdoing. I just want to create a space for all of you to be welcomed. Even the parts that shame and guilt you. Now hold up, John. We was cool with the all of you is welcome part until you started to talk about being kind to the parts that shame and guilt you. I don't know about that, John. Okay, stay tuned. Let me walk you through it. Awareness heals. That's a hard truth, sir. Be very true. You can betray yourself being nice. Yes, thank you. Is that B. Nigel? Not sure how to say it, but shout out to you. So true that you can betray yourself in being nice. So I err on the side of being kind to yourself. Will you create a space for all of you to be welcome, even the parts that shame and guilt you? When I reflect on kindness, I sometimes like to call out shame for what it is, or I like to call out guilt for what it is. And oftentimes I see myself sitting at the table with them. Maybe about a year or two ago, I used to see myself in some big office, some nice office space, like a real table with chairs around it. I'm sitting at the head of the table, and on my left I have shame, and on my right I have guilt. And now it's more of a brunch. I love a good brunch, right? And so I like to sit down at the table with all of me to hear what shame has to say and to hear what guilt has to say. Thanks, Dr. Sutherland. Kindness always wins. Now pay attention now, because remember I said kindness is about creating space for all of you to be welcome, even the parts that shame and guilt you. Now watch this now, okay? For those of you that have challenges with creating spaces that are kind to you, I'm going to give you 4 prompts, okay? 4 prompts up at the top here, and I'll come back and revisit them. For those of you who want to practice more kindness towards yourself and learn how to move through shame and guilt, I'm going to give you 4 prompts. The first prompt is, I feel. Number 2, I want or I need. Number 3, this is your action step, okay? I hope to manage it by. And number 4, you can support me by. Now it's okay if you didn't have an opportunity to write them down. I got a worksheet for you at the end, and I also come back to them. So I feel, number 1. Number 2, I want or I need. Number 3, I hope to manage it by. And number 4, you can support me by. All right? Very good. So when I sit down at the table, creating a kind space for all of me to be welcome, I look over there at shame and I look over there at guilt. Like this is a real life situation, right, that I'm in. And I'm trying to figure out, why is shame and guilt present? How come every time I get ready to step out and do something new, or believe in myself, or fall in love, or come out of a toxic relationship, why am I hearing thoughts in my head like, you're not enough? It's not going to work out. You should feel bad about what you're doing. Why am I doing that? What is that about? Because quiet as it's kept, those are the thoughts that trigger anxiety. Those are the thoughts that will trigger depression. Just thinking yourself, your thinking patterns, or thinking yourself into anxiety. A simple phrase like, I'm not enough. I'm unworthy. It'll never turn out right. That type of thinking process over time, it can trigger your stress response. And your stress response, for some of us who are familiar with it, maybe being in elementary, middle school, you all remember we used to say the fight or flight response? Either I'm getting ready to fight or flight, as in run. Yeah, when we have those conversations with ourselves, the mind is interpreting as if it's happening now. It's difficult for this mind, this brain of ours, to sometimes distinguish between, am I asleep right now? Is this a memory? Or if this is happening now? The way our bodies are set up, it's responding to it all the same way. Have you ever been asleep and wake up swinging, right? The mind isn't interpreting that while you are sleeping, it's not really happening. It's just a dream. No. Our sophisticated hardware, it says any threat must be handled the same way. So as I sit down with shame and I sit down with guilt and I say, I'm going to be kind to you, I want to listen to what you have to say to me, the first thing that you will conclude, that I have concluded, is that they are both uncomfortable. They both facilitate discomfort. They both, shame and guilt, that's what they do. They make us uncomfortable, right? Sometimes it feels like anxiety. Sometimes it feels like heart palpitations, sweaty hands. It feels like shutting down, sad, like nobody cares. But at the end of the day, shame and guilt are going to do their job. And the job of shame and guilt is to create discomfort. Now, in being kind to myself, it's important that I bring all of me to the table. When I bring all of me to the table, I ask a second question to shame and guilt. How are you serving me? All right, I'm coming into form now. Let's buckle up, everyone. When I think about shame and guilt, I understand that they both have the experience, or they both facilitate discomfort. So I ask myself, how is that serving me? And you may conclude two things. And one is, shame and guilt is going to help you facilitate a process. It's going to help you facilitate a process. And oftentimes that process is control. Shame and guilt will act in that way to facilitate a process and to control. Number two, shame and guilt, they have a protective nature to them. John, they're going to kick you off this live if you keep talking about shame and guilt helps you facilitate a process, or it has a protective nature to it. You better get to it, and you better do it moving. All right, let me do it then. To the people who invest their life in hating other people, to people who invest their life in being prejudiced towards others, oppressing other people. You may see someone ask them, you may hear them ask the question, well, what kind of person would do that? Now that statement is key because it contains both shame and guilt in it. And that moment, to the person who is hating or has some prejudice or oppressing someone, we want to shame them back into the middle ground again, because whatever they are doing, they have broken or ripped apart the moral fiber, and we as the people say, you're wrong. In that sense, we're using shame and guilt to help facilitate a process of bringing people back to the middle. We want them to reflect on their ways and do it differently. On that side, we're like, cool, yeah, let's use shame and guilt in that way, right? Because it's helpful in facilitating the process, often controlled. Now let's talk about love for a moment. Let's talk about how shame and guilt, that same process, can interrupt connecting and attaching to other people. Oftentimes this shows up in relationships. Have you ever started to fall in love? I mean, like you feel it, like you really about to start falling in love. Like, yeah, you around here singing all kind of Mary J songs or love songs, and I don't know who y'all listen to out here. Probably Celine Dion, I don't know. But you singing, right? You got the whole mixtape. Wait, John, you showing your age. They don't do mixtapes no more. But you know what I'm talking about. Your playlists on the record player. I mean, you are singing, baby, because you are falling in love. And then you hear something that says, this ain't going to turn out right. Does that ever happen to you before? She ain't real. He ain't real. He don't really mean it. I'm not worthy. I don't even know how I got this kind of man. I don't even know how I got this kind of woman. What you will begin to understand is how shame... Oh, somebody raising their hand. I appreciate that. Shout out to you, TN Born 82. Here's what I'm learning about shame and guilt. When we have a need that's not met, there's a feeling that accompanies it. And because we all want the big three, we all want to be heard, valued, and belong, when we don't get those things, we look to our social environment to say, what happened? How come my needs are not being met? And because of who we are, we collect data from the environment to form some conclusion. And often that conclusion is, there's something about me that is fundamentally flawed that is keeping me from love. And so that's where the shame statement occurs. That's how shame begins its way of protecting you from feeling that same hurt again, because shame has a good way of reminding us. It'll say, remember that time when so-and-so didn't come through for you? Do you remember that time when that relationship didn't go through? Why? Because I was unworthy of love. I should have never believed in it anyway. I'm worthless. You know, it's those types of statements, when we say them out loud, they build the shame wheel. They build the safety response of, don't do that again, because if you do, you'll walk into it and it'll get you hurt. That's tough. It's tough to get to a space that when you're ready to fall in love, you start to think about all those early childhood relationships or even present day relationships that reflected back to you the reason why it didn't work out is because I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me. I thought I was a bad person. And so now when you go out in real time and you're trying to meet, you're trying to connect, all you're hearing is, don't do it. It's not going to turn out well. Whether you know it or not, that is a part of the shame cycle. That is a part of the guilt cycle that's playing out in real time. Why? Because the last time it happened, it was so bad and it was so painful that shame and guilt is going to create enough discomfort to help you move away from it, even if it means love. So this is why I ask you, people that I come in contact with, to be kind to yourself, because if you want to change something, the first thing you must do is to get an understanding of it. And so when we understand that shame and guilt has this protective nature to it because of something that is unhealed or unfinished in our past, and it didn't go well, that shame cycle will keep in to prevent us from going back into that situation, not realizing that, wow, that stuff happened 5-10 years ago, but I never was released from it. I am still reflecting back and still believing that I'm unworthy or that I'm not good enough. And so for those people who want to do the work, who want to do it differently, I'm asking you to create yourself a brunch table where you sit down with parts of you or these ideas that are serving you in a way that may be unhealthy, to sit down with them, and then you acknowledge you first by saying, I feel. I feel nervous. I feel out of sorts. I feel this way because every time I get ready to go into a relationship, it always seems to turn out, you get to fill in the blank. What do I want? What do I need? I most want connection. I most desire closeness. I hope to manage it by. That's your action step. How do you hope to manage it? I intend to show up. I intend to be the first one to send a text message. I'm okay with creating the first date. I'm okay with following up and saying hello and how I'm doing. And if you're talking to someone else, you can say, and you can support me by understanding that all of this is brand new to me. I don't really know how to do it myself, but I'm learning. Sometimes if you're anything like me, that last statement is a conversation with myself in the mirror saying, like, you can support me by, meaning you, John, inner child being, giving me some space so that every time I may make a mistake or it feels like I'm making a mistake, I don't need the shame wheel anymore to give me permission to love. I don't need guilt to give me permission to connect. I don't need you to give me permission to feel safe anymore. I choose to use these 4 prompts in a way where I can show up for the fullness of myself by creating a kind space and articulating what I want and what I need in my life. Shame, thank you. Guilt, thank you. You did keep me safe. You did create such a space that was so uncomfortable for me. Here it is. It's coming into form. Thank you, shame and guilt, for creating a space for me where I would feel so uncomfortable that I had to hide myself. Here it is. Thank you, shame and guilt, for creating such a space that you taught me how to be invisible. Because when I am invisible, when I'm hiding and I'm unseen, then you can't hurt me. That's what shame and guilt does. It shrinks you. It makes you invisible. But what you can do today is stand in a space of kindness and say, hey, all of me is welcome. As Jeffrey Anthony Charles says, truly rewriting the narrative, on this day, I choose to bring all of me to the table, even the parts that may shame and guilt me, and ask, how are they serving me? And when I understand that they are serving me in a way that helps me stay safe, hidden, invisible, just so that I won't get hurt, and I have a choice at that moment. I can say, I feel, I want, or I need, and this is how I'm going to manage it. I'm going to create spaces for myself today to be safe. I'm going to actively do it. I no longer need the permission of shame and guilt to do it. All right? So this is the practice of kindness towards self. It's about bringing you all of you to the table. Hey, if you didn't get the prompts, that's okay. I got you. After this video ends, go over to Mainspring at Mainspring CTS. They're on Instagram. Click the link in the bio, and there will be 2 handouts for you. One, to create your kindness definition towards yourself. Okay? The practice of kindness towards self. You can't move forward until you get your kindness definition. And then number 2, these same prompts, I feel, I want, or need, I hope to manage it by, you can support me by, guess what? They're already in a handout for you. A fillable document. Just download it and do the work, right? Okay, you all. Until next time.